Hey guys, Positive here, and today we're going to be ranking the tier 8 heavies based on, well, kind of popular request. So, just a disclaimer, this list was kind of hard to make, because at tier 8 there are really a lot of nice tanks and really a lot of bad tanks. It's kind of hard to separate them out. And also, as another disclaimer, I won't be ranking the tanks that I haven't played, so like the AMX M4 49 and like the 252U. But, yeah, there's a lot of really good tanks on this list that I didn't rank, that I really wish I could have, but without playing them, I just feel like I don't have enough of a nuanced opinion to really properly judge them. But without further ado, let's get started. And coming in dead last is the KV4. And I'm not gonna lie, when I was making this video, this is not something I expected. But the more I played it to try and get at least some reasonably okay footage for it, the more I hated it. And it's because this thing's a land battleship, with all the negatives of a ship and none of the positives. So, it moves slowly, it turns slowly, it shoots slowly, just everything about it is slow. Even the accuracy, like, it only does 320 damage per shot, but it's got the accuracy of like an IS-5. So you'll be aiming for like 10 seconds or something for some stupid like 300 damage shot. It's just terrible, especially because like that means you have to expose for so long and the enemy just has no trouble buttering the turret on this thing. And on top of that, like the hull armor, it's decent, but it's not really good enough to balance anything more than like a tier 8 medium, which is really disappointing, especially when you consider how bad everything else is. All in all, it's just a terrible tank, and I just really didn't expect it to put it here, but I just had to. And next on the list is the VK45.02A, which is actually the tank I expected to put on the bottom. It's just the KV4 was so bad I had to bump up the VK. The thing about the VK is just, it's a heavy tank that wants to be a medium, but it just does none of those things well at all. It's only got 310 alpha, which is not great, and the gun is just so bad. You can see, like, it doesn't really have the accuracy that you would expect out of a German tank. It doesn't have the penetration either, because even after the buff, it's still just like the first 10.5 you unlock on the Tiger II. Like, it's basically a stock gun. And you can see that I just take pot shots all day at this Lurva, and I just fail to pen, I miss him, it's terrible. And on top of that, the armor's not very good either. You can see that the enemy's pretty much just got no problems just buttering straight through the turret on this thing. The frontal hull's pretty flat, the sides are flat and pretty thin. Everything about it sucks. The mobility, while better than a lot of heavies, is still not very good, which is why the VK45 is just such a terrible tank. Coming up next, we have the Chieftain T95, and given how difficult this event was for me to get this tank for free, I kind of expected something better. But like the VK45, it's just another case of a heavy tank that wants to be a medium and it just kind of sucks at life. There's no other way to put it. I mean, you don't really have the armor of a heavy tank because you've got the Chieftain hull, which is terrible. It means that everything triple overmatches your sides. The lower plate sucks, and then the American turret on top is great except for the giant cupola on top that everyone just easily hits. So that's the armor profile. The mobility, it's better than most heavies, but it's still not even close to a medium tank, which is also disappointing. And it still means that you can't really do medium tank things all that well. And then the gun, it's a medium tank gun essentially, but 225 alpha on a tank that's not as fast as a medium and has not as much armor as a medium. It's disappointing. And bringing up the number 16 slot is the IS-2SH, which is basically what happens when the Soviets attempt to build an FP2-15B. And like the FP2-15B, they tried to give it a slightly more accurate gun, and it is slightly more accurate than most IS tanks, but you just trade away all the things that make an IS tank an IS tank. You trade away pretty much all the armor, and you get a rear-mounted turret. Rear-mounted turret is just disastrous. It's unbelievably bad. And I think a lot of people really underestimate just how bad having a rear-mounted turret on a tank is. I can't stress enough how bad this rear-mounted turret is. And on top of the fact that it doesn't have very much armor, and even though the gun is slightly better than most IS tanks, it's not a very good gun, because it's still an IS tank. And that's basically the IS-2SH in a nutshell. And next up, we have a tank that has aged about as well as a 15-year-old banana in the corner of your room. It kind of smells, you don't really want to touch it, you just kind of leave it there. And that's more or less how I feel about the IS-6. I remember back in the day, this tank used to be considered a seal clubber tank. These days, definitely not so much. For starters, let's talk about the armor. well, the turret's paper, okay? People can pretty much just aim center mass at you and just pen you. Because people can pen the matlet, they can pen the cheeks, they can pen the roof, the cupolas. If you turn the turret slightly, they can pen that too easily. And then, so it's just garbage. As for the hull armor, I suppose if they don't aim well, you can troll a bounce or two, maybe. But, like, otherwise they could just pen you in the driver's hatch. If they're above you, it's not an issue. If you angle, they can pen you in the shoulder plates. And it's also the only IS tank that doesn't have black hole side armor. All in all, it's just terrible. Like, the T-49 will pen the sides, but the T-49 can't do anything about pretty much any other IS tank, just for reference. Which brings us to the gun, I guess. You've got two options for the gun. You can either run the pen gun like I do, and then that just kind of makes it like just a worse IS tank compared to all the other IS variants out there. Or like you can go as like a lot of people do, and you can run the DPM gun. A lot of people say that the DPM gun is what makes the IS-6 unique, but I think that running the DPM gun, it's like putting hot sauce on your ice cream. It's unique, it just also sucks. Because the thing is, with the DPM gun, the pen is so low. You've got 175 pen, so you can either load the gold, which still has crappy pen, and also completely removes the DPM advantage of the DPM gun, or you can just sit in the open for like 10 seconds and try and aim at some weak spot somewhere, which also doesn't work out all that well for you, especially given how inaccurate the IS-6 is, because the fully aimed dispersion on this tank is just absolute garbage. And yeah, that's the IS-6. It's just bad. So at this point, we've gone through 5 tanks, but we're still not out of the basement yet. Number 14, it's the Caernarvon. I know this is going to piss some people off, because I know a lot of people like to swear by this tank, but it's really not that good. And I think one of the biggest issues really with the Caernarvon, it's the alpha damage. The alpha damage is so bad. 180, that's just not enough for tier 8. I'm sorry. It's worse than medium tanks. And it means you just have to constantly expose. I mean, you just saw that IS-8 there. I just shoot him 3 times. And with an IS tank, I'm sure I would have hit him like probably twice maybe. And just done just substantially more to him. And that's really the problem. You just have to keep firing and firing. But this tank doesn't really have the armor to do so. If it had like an amazing turret, I suppose it would be great. But the fact that you just have to keep exposing with such a poorly armored heavy tank, it's really awful. I know the DPM is good, but that's about it. You've got good pen, good DPM, good accuracy. It's just not enough, especially in today's tier 8 when you have to deal with things like IS-5s, VK-100s. You just have to sit there and just keep shooting. When those guys, they can just peek around a corner, peek from a cooldown, and just slam you back for more than twice what you can do with one shot. It's just awful. I guess the mobility on this tank's not bad. But it always comes back to the fact that this tank just doesn't have the alpha damage. You have to work so hard to put out the damage. Like, I get that it has great DPM, but that's just really not enough to carry this tank. I'm sorry. Coming in at number 13, ranked above all these other previous garbage tanks, is the KB5. And I have to say, I was also kind of surprised by how high I ended up ranking the KB5. Because on paper, this tank is honestly terrible. Like, the armor's riddled with weak spots, it's a super heavy tank, the pen kind of sucks, but somehow this tank just works. I don't know how. It's actually pretty fast for a super heavy, especially if you go downhill, so ramming people can be fun. And for some reason, this tank seems to actually bounce shots, unlike the KB4, which I just don't understand. Like, look at that. ISU bounced, that TD on the hill bounced. I don't know like what about it that makes it bounce, but somehow it works against at least tier 8 and tier 7 opponents. And while the pen sucks, the DPM is actually good on this tank, I suppose, and you can bring it into close combat, I guess, unlike the IS-6. And the thing is, unlike the IS-6, this tank kind of just does its job, and it just soaks hits. And because of that mobility, you can pretty much always ensure that you're in a place where you can soak hits for your team. And if you can find something to bully, this tank is really great for bullying things. I mean, I guess that's enough praising the tank. This tank is still not that good. So don't get me wrong, it's still not a great tank because there's no getting past the fact that this armor is still not very reliable. Against tier 9s, you're going to struggle pretty hard. But it's honestly not as bad as I thought it would end up being. And filling in the number 12 slot, it's the M6A2E1 EXP. Which I feel like everyone at this point has because WG gave them out like candy in the last event. But regardless, it's not a great tank, to be honest. For starters, I guess the mobility is not that great. 30 kilometers an hour. Power to weight's kind of mediocre. And on top of that, the DPM is just terrible on this tank. Absolutely terrible. It's somehow worse than the VK100. And you have 60 less alpha damage. On top of that, the armor, it's good, I guess. Like, but it's kind of like an RNG-based armor where you can't really rely on it. And a lot of times people will just punch through. And the sides, well, T-49s are going to have a field day with the sides of this tank. Other problems with this tank include the camo rating, which is literally the worst camo rating in the game. It's actually worse than the mouse somehow. So, yeah, normally camo isn't a problem on heavy tanks, but on this tank it's just so horrifically bad that I just had to mention how bad the camo is on this tank. I guess the only real strong points on this tank are the fact that other than the just awful DPM, it is the T-34's gun, so if you fully aim it in, I guess it's reasonably accurate. 400 alpha with great pen, that's also not bad. And if you play hull down with that 10 degrees gun depression, I suppose it's okay. But the cheeks, the forehead, the turret ring, those are all going to be liabilities when you're playing this tank. Now, filling in the number 11 slot is a tank that plays a fairly similar role, I guess, to the M6 and the KV5 in that you just kind of roll forward, you soak some hits, some will pen, some will bounce, and you just hopefully deal the damage and maybe your team will be able to do something about your loss. But it's the VK100-01P, and honestly, I kind of wanted to like this tank, it's just I could never really make this thing work. Especially after the nerf to the gun handling, the nerf to the weak spots. Now, everyone, even tier 7s will just have no issue just penning the lower plate. The cupola is still an issue. Like, people will snipe the cupola. The mobility, it's a German super heavy, which means you go 20 kilometers an hour, and that's also a problem. But the one big thing that this tank really has going for it is just the great alpha. 460 alpha on a heavy tank is brilliant, and it means that since your armor will just bounce every now and then, you can pretty much just kind of roll towards the enemy and trade your way to victory. So it's actually really difficult to do poorly in this tank. It's just really difficult to do well in it. And I think no tank exemplifies that high floor, low ceiling better than the VK100. Because there's not a whole lot you can do in this tank really, other than just kind of roll towards the enemy at 20 kilometers an hour and just hope for the best. Now the first tank in our top 10 is the Tiger II. And I think a lot of you are going to be surprised by this, and I am too, to be honest, because the Tiger II is generally kind of looked down upon, but when's the last time you actually played a Tiger II? Just honestly, I don't think anyone has played the Tiger II recently, and neither have I. And after playing it, I kind of realized the Tiger II's not terrible somehow. So for starters, the mobility on this tank is actually reasonable. Like, it's got a reasonable speed limit. I mean, it's not a good hill climber, but if you can go downhill or on flat ground, it's reasonably mobile. It's kind of like a Lerva that trades a little bit of the especially the turret armor, for a little extra mobility, and especially against tier 8s and tier 7s, which oftentimes don't have heat shells. The turret will bounce shots, and especially the upper hull as well. If you can get this thing hull down, the upper hull can be fairly difficult to pen. And then the gun, it's got that vaunted German accuracy. It's a lot like the Lerva gun. It's slightly less accurate, but it's still pretty much a sniper rifle for a heavy tank. 310 alpha, it's on the low side, and for 310 alpha, the DPM is slightly on the low side, but it's still better than like most of the 122mm arm tanks. So all in all, just not a terrible tank, but not really enough to put it over the edge for a great tank. Now, in the number 9 slot is a tank that I'm sure will end up being kind of like that 15-year-old banana that is the IS-6. It is the IS-5, and I remember when this tank came out, everyone just hyped over this thing. But honestly, I feel like people are starting to come around and starting to realize that the IS-5 is not really all that it's cracked up to be. Because, for start, no case against the IS-5 can really happen without the gun. The gun is awful. You can't hit anything. Like, you saw that shot in the T-34. Not even in the same zip code as that guy. And on top of that, like, especially compared to a tank like the IS-3, the turret's not as strong. Like, you saw that T-34 just pen the cupolas on this thing. And you only gain just a little bit of hull armor. The hull will troll some bounces, I guess, but you trade away so much compared to an IS-3 just for that just little extra bit of hull armor, and it's not worth it. it's not worth it because you can't hit anything. Like even the slightest movement, you can see this tank's aiming circle is bigger than Russia itself. So you pretty much have to play close range with it, and like in this clip you see I just kind of eventually give up on trying to hull down brawl because sure they're gonna have a difficult time penning me, but I guess they'll pen me eventually in the cupolas and I'll just never hit them. Let alone not just pen them, but I'm just not even gonna hit them. That's just how bad this gun is. It's horrific. And that's really the biggest drawback of the IS-5 is it would be a decent tank if you could actually hit something. But on it, you just kind of have to roll the dice and just hope to dear God that you hit something. And that's really all I have to say. I guess the high speed limit makes it fairly good for aggressive play because that's the only thing you can do. The only thing this tank can do, I suppose, is just YOLO people, close the distance to like within 50 meters, and then just try and hit them. That's about it. And ranking above the IS-5 is the 112, which I think is what the IS-5 should be. Like, if you're gonna just trade away all those things for just a little extra hull armor, you might as well go all the way and have a solid hull. So the 112 actually has the exact same hull as the Tier 10 113, which is still pretty well armored even for Tier 10, let alone Tier 8. At Tier 8, nothing's gonna pen that upper plate. Just nothing. The turret's also about the same. Like, no one's going to pen it unless they hit the cupolas, kind of like the IS-5. And the gun is also similarly, basically just a blunt club instead of a gun, to quote WG. And that's more or less the 112. Compared to the IS-5, it trades away a little bit of that speed limit. But I think it's worth it to actually do what it was meant to do, and that's just kind of have good hull armor, I suppose. If you're going to brawl, you might as well just do it well. And so that's why I ranked the 112 higher than the IS-5, but I still don't really like it. It's just unpleasant to play, especially with that inaccurate gun, although I suppose in this clip I'm getting amazing RNG. But yeah, that's the 112. And at number 7 is the place where we've finally crossed the line from generally bad tanks to generally good tanks. Tier 8 is kind of bipolar like that, where there's just lots of trash tanks and some really nice ones. And so coming in at number 7 is the T-34. It was personally my first premium tank I ever got, and it's a great credit workhorse. And I think it still holds up even after all this time, because it's honestly difficult to go wrong with just a solid turret, 10 degrees gun depression, 400 alpha damage. That's a solid recipe right there. And on top of that, the T-34 is excellent penetration, TD levels essentially. So you never really have any issues punching through people. And when you fully aim in, this tank is reasonably accurate actually. It's got .317 base dispersion. The gun handling and aim time lets it down, but unlike a lot of other tanks, the T-34 actually has the turret armor to sit there and expose itself for the time it needs to be able to aim in its shots. And the shots it does hit for 400, which is really excellent. So all in all, I think the T-34 is overall a solid tank. I guess the hull armor leaves some to be desired. And the gun handling, you can't snapshot with this tank. That will always be an issue. But for the job it was designed for, it does it quite well. And ranked just above the T-34, I put at number 6, is the T-32. And the reason why I put the T-32 above the T-34 is, yeah, a lot of people like to rip on the T-32, and I'd appreciate a buff, but honestly, I think the T-32 is still quite nice. Because kind of like the Pershing, like the T-69, the one thing that people rip on is just the penetration. And honestly, penetration is not enough to sink a tank in my book. Sure, the pen is not as good as other heavies at 198, but it's still better than mediums. And unlike the T-34, the T-32 is reasonably quick, and the hull armor is reasonably good. A lot of low pen enemies will struggle against the frontal hull of the T-32, especially if you get this thing hull down. And that just makes me more comfortable, especially when going hull down. And the turret as a whole is much harder to pen. So unlike the T-34, which can be penned through the cheeks, the T-32 rock solid turret. T-32 is also more accurate, like at least on the move, so you can snapshot a little bit better. And also, the T-32 has got better DPM. So that is, DPM is something that T-34 has always kind of struggled with, but the T-32 has that little bit of a DPM edge, even though you do lose some alpha for it. But you can see, like, when you put the T-32 in these hull down positions, it's just a monster. And honestly, the T-32 is just one of the only tanks that I would have been comfortable with in this situation. Putting myself pretty much alone in the dunes against half their enemy team, with only the support of a charioteer. And that's really where I think the T-32 shines, because that rate of fire and DPM allows you to just pretty much survive this onslaught, where I think a tank like the T-34 with its weaker hull and lower DPM would not have been able to pull this one out. And cracking into the top 5 is the Lerva, which is probably the one tank in the top 5 that I would say is exceedingly boring to play. And the reason why the Lerva is boring is because it's just really slow, but it just does everything that it needs to be. For one, it's got a sniper rifle of a gun. It's super accurate, and this thing is basically the closest thing to a laser, I would say, at tier 8. You can snipe weak spots, not that you need to with your excellent penetration on this gun. It's second only to the T-34 of the tier 8 heavies. The DPM is pretty solid, 310 alpha. I guess it's not brilliant, but it's not bad, especially given the DPM. The armor, especially after the buffs, it's pretty good. If people don't load the gold or don't really aim well, you'll get some bounces. You can hold down also pretty well. The cheeks can be penned, but a lot of people will still bounce off of it. And it's just solid tank. It just does what it needs to do. You can angle, you can side scrape, you can hold down. You can do all of it just pretty much well enough, I guess. The real thing that really lets it down is the mobility, and that's what makes it kind of really boring to play. It's difficult to influence fights when you don't have the mobility to get there, but once you do, this tank will actually influence the fight. Coming in at the number 4 slot, it's a tank that everyone forgot about, and even I forgot about this tank until I shot the video, but it is the tier 8 Chinese 110. And the thing about the 110 is, it's basically what happens when you take the IS-5 and you just fix the biggest flaw about the IS-5, which is the gun. So as I mentioned in the IS-5 segment, the gun is just awful on the IS-5, but that's not the case with the 110. The 110 has a pretty solid gun. It's fairly accurate, especially for an IS tank. You've got pretty decent DPM, so this gun is actually usable, unlike the IS-5. However, you keep everything that makes the IS-5 good. You keep that mobility, you keep that turret armor, you keep that upper hull armor, and actually the upper hull on the 110 is actually better than the IS-5. And that just makes the 110 just excellent at that kind of aggressive job that it needs to play. And on top of this, I think it's even better than the Lerva, because the thing about the 110 is, sure, you lose a little bit of that German accuracy, and you lose a little bit of that penetration and gun depression, but you gain so much. You gain a much, much better turret, you gain much more mobility, and so that essentially fixes the biggest flaw with the Lerva as well. And so all in all, the 110 is just such a gem of a tank that it's kind of a shame that everyone overlooked it, especially considering that when this thing was released, it was an absolute monster. Just had monstrous DPM. And even after the nerf, the DPM is still good. So I don't know why people forgot about it, but it's honestly worth a revisit if you haven't already. Now, being the autoloader fanatic that I am, how could I make this list without highly ranking my original one true love, the AMX 5100? And even though they removed my beloved 4th shell, 3 shells is still pretty lethal. 930 clip potential at tier 8 is still much more tier for tier than the 1200 that the AMX 50B has at tier 10. And that, I think, is really awesome. So you keep that trademark French firepower and the trademark French mobility. Unfortunately, though, you do keep the trademark French complete lack of armor. But the way I see it, when it comes to things like the 5100, my motto is they can't pen you if they're dead. And that's just the thing about the 5100. It's pretty much kind of like a one-trick pony in that you just kind of YOLO people and you can kill them really quickly if you have shells in the clip. But it just does that so well, and that's really what sets the 5100 apart from the competition, is that nothing else can compete. There's no other tank with just so much clip potential while maintaining the mobility that the 5100 has. I think it's a little bit harder to play than something like, say, the 110 or the IS-3, but it's such a rewarding tank once played well. And I think the only thing that really kept it lower on the list than being in maybe the number 1 or number 2 slot is the complete lack of armor does present a problem at tier 8 when so many things have tough turrets. But if you can make these opportunities, the 5100 just shines. And also, just to re-highlight the whole firepower thing, it's the same gun as the botch at tier 9. So you have that amazing 232mm standard pen. And I think that really just frames just how nice the gun is at tier 8. And coming in at the number 2 slot, it's the IS-3. And a lot of people like to claim that the IS-3 has been power creeped by like the IS-6, the IS-5, just all sorts of random tanks over the years. And it begs the question, has the IS-3 really been power creeped? Because the IS-3 really has, over the years, kind of reinvented itself and carved out a niche for itself at the Tier 8 meta. And so I guess to defend the IS-3, let me start with the armor. So sure, like the hull armor is not exactly brilliant, but the HD remodel did make the hull slightly more troll than it was before. And on top of this, the IS-3 has the best turret at Tier 8, period. It's better than the T-32, better than the T-34. Because when this thing gets hull down and it only shows the turret, there's literally no weak spots. You're not going to pen a hull down IS-3. There's no cupolas to shoot at. There's no anything for you to shoot at. All you can do is just kind of give up and look for something else to shoot at. So that's the IS-3 turret. In addition to the turret, the IS-3 is also the fastest IS tank. It's got the highest power to weight by a pretty fair margin, I think like 2 effective horsepower per ton on hard, which means that unlike other IS tanks, which might struggle a little bit when going up hills, the IS-3 has no such issues, and it has no problems at all maintaining its 38 km/h top speed. And on top of this, the gun that the IS-3 fields is quite nice. You've got that 122mm BL9, excellent penetration, actually the best AP pen of all Tier 8 IS tanks. You've got great, like, the best accuracy when fully aimed. And that's really a difference maker, because when you're playing those long-range, like, positional fights where you're trying to play hull down against things, the fact that the IS-3 can fully aim in and actually hit something, like, that you were actually aiming for, that's a game changer, especially compared to garbage like the IS-5. I'm sure you guys remember that IS-5 clip where I just fully aimed on a T-34, not even in the same zip code. The IS-3, not a problem. When you fully aim this gun, you're going to hit what you aim for. And that's really nice, especially because you've got that turret armor. And that turret armor means that I'm extremely comfortable just sitting hull down. I can take all the time in the world that I want to aim. And that combination of just excellent turret armor, mobility, great gun, it's really the gold standard for what an IS tank should be, in my opinion. Now I suppose I should probably give a passing mention to the 252U or like the 112-2. Those are really nice tanks, and they would definitely make it quite high on this list if I actually played them. It's just I haven't played them enough to make a nuanced opinion, which is why I'm putting the IS-3 here. And at number 1, the best of the best, at least of the tanks that I've played, it's the IS-3 Defender. Now, when the Defender came out, it was overpowered, and it's still overpowered to this day. Somehow it hasn't been nerfed, probably because it's a premium tank, but it really ought to have been. Because the thing about the Defender is it basically just takes the excellent IS-3 platform, all the strengths, like the solid turret, the solid mobility, and then it just slaps on and just more layers of just advantages. So compared to the IS-3, the Defender gets 7 degrees of gun depression over the IS-3's 5, and this is amazing because it makes the Defender just much more flexible in dealing with hills and ridge lines and things, whereas the IS-3 might have to do some sort of funky tricks and use the terrain to try and make it work. The Defender has no such issues. On top of this, the Defender also gets that 3-shell autoloader. Even though the interclip is still 7.5 seconds, when you're fighting against heavies, that faster reload does make all the difference. And it just feels like it racks up damage quite quickly, especially with that autoloader. And you can also use, even the reload on this tank is not really a disadvantage because it's really easy to just use the reload, just take that time and relocate and then set up with just a full new magazine ready to go once you find a new target. And on top of this, the IS-3 Defender, unlike the IS-3, actually has a pretty troll hull. So it's essentially just an upgraded version of the IS-3's hull. So one of the problems that the IS-3 had is, like, if someone can catch the hull of the IS-3, it's pretty difficult to bounce off that. But the IS-3 Defender has just these random patches where it's just a little stronger, and the IS-3 Defender's hull is also better angled, which makes the IS-3 Defender just all that much better. And really, like, you tack on that autoloader, you tack on that IS-3 mobility, and it just makes a ferocious assault tank. You can still play the hull downs like the IS-3 can, but you also it can also just play so aggressively, and that's really where the IS-3 Defender shines. And I mean, you can look at WG's balance charts. It's got like the highest win rate at tier 8. So it's really little wonder that I had to place the i3 Defender all the way this high. And that's pretty much it for today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And as usual, have a wonderful day, and bye.